We are going live. Excellent. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm splendid, thank you.
Splendid.
Yes.
We're twinning again today, you can see.
Green, because we have an Irish guest, so we weren't quite sure, but I'm sure it's the right colour.
Well, that was the conversation I had with myself this morning. I know he was born in Derry, which is the northern part of Ireland, which is supposed to be orange, but we don't have anything orange except for Halloween costumes, which are prison uniforms.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really the great way to meet such a distinguished gentleman. So we're green and orange on the ticker today.
Oh, the ticker, that's right. Good. Okay, we'll bring him on in a couple of minutes. He's a very interesting gentleman. I'm sure you're going to love him. And he's many things. He's been a priest. He's been an unpriest, a happily married man for many years.
Yep.
He's written books, a screenplay, and he's a psychotherapist
And
now.
he's producing a documentary with one of our guests that was on a couple of weeks ago. You may have seen her, Dina Sheldon.
That's right.
She's in the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And thankfully, thank you, Dina, if you're watching.
Yes.
Introduce us to Seamus. So without further ado,
let's bring on Seamus.
Shall we? And the crowd goes wild for Mr. Seamus O'Connor.
Hello.
And by the magic of television, he is. Welcome.
Good morning, Seamus.
Well, what a pleasure it is to meet you, and thank you for having me on. It's just been wonderful.
Absolutely. You're coming to us from where this morning? Where in the world are you?
I live over in the desert in Southern California. Actually, it's almost the desert. It's Beaumont. We're in the pass before you drop down into the desert. Anybody familiar with the 10 freeway knows what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great part of the world.
Yes.
So are you?
Yeah.
Are you up any elevation, or are you on the flat?
No, we're up. We're 2,700 feet. So in the summertime, we enjoy like 20 degrees cooler weather than the desert itself. So
that is so smart.
Super. Yeah, absolutely.
We're aficionados of desert hot springs. My husband and I go to Two Bunch Palms a lot, and boy, it gets hot on the desert floor.
Yeah, 117 degrees. Sometimes we go over to the movies or over to shop or lunch or something, and you get out of the car. I mean, thank heavens for our little air-conditioned bubbles we can ride around in. I don't know how you do it.
That's absolutely right. So we're presuming that it was not quite so hot in the summers where you were born. Tell us about where
were you born?
Yeah, your hometown.
I was born in Northern Ireland in County Tyrone, which is close to Derry, and I went to school in Derry. Or sometimes in the map they make the misprint and they call it Londonderry, but we never do. But anyway, so I went to school there, and then I was this kind of kid who never knew what I wanted to be, and my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and my uncle, who was a doctor, said, I didn't think that was a good idea. I don't think you have a passion for healing. You just want the nice car. And so I instead I went to seminary, and when you're like 17, you've just done A-levels. 7 years seemed like an eternity, and something will turn up. Well, nothing ever did, and my procrastination, I kept coming back every September, and one June I was ordained. I mean, it's almost like that absence of decision, where you just. I had a funny kind of story where I was listening to this woman talk, and she was telling about. She said, I was in a Kmart in Daly City, that's like south of San Francisco. And she said, and I woke up and I had 2 kids. The last decision I had made, I was a sophomore at McClatchy High School in Sacramento.
How did that happen?
That was my story. I woke up one day in Sacramento, and I had been a priest for 6 months, and I was in California.
Wow.
That kind of how numb and dumb. Some people, I was one of them, who, go through life just with that decision. And
wow, so you went to the seminary thinking that something else would happen and take you.
I got a degree in philosophy. You can't go wrong, and then then 4 more years of divinity, and at 17, that just seems like an eternity, something.
Yes,
sure.
And I just never made any decisions except, and it wasn't callous in the sense that I was bad or anything like that. I went with the program, and I was a good student, and I got by, and I always had that thing, that even though I wasn't terribly holy, I could pass exams well.
Right.
So,
well, and so how do you get out of a decision like that you've made?
Well, you don't get out easily. Well, it got to be easier. I left in 1971, but in the meantime, I had been promoted, and I was the vicar for legal affairs for the diocese. I had a doctorate in canon law and all of this kind of stuff. And but I all along I kind of knew this wasn't right. And then along came a very attractive young woman, and she and I hit it off, and and
the rest, as they say, is
this is really what I need to do, and before I get any older. And so I'd been a priest for like 10 years, and so I walked away, resigned. Actually, I wrote a letter of resignation, went into the bishop with it, and let him read it, and and walked away and started a new life.
Wow. That was my question, is what is the actual procedure of how do you unpriest yourself?
Unfrock.
Well, a friend of mine who was in Rome actually walked through papers for the dispensation. I didn't know he was doing it.
Yeah.
The diocese had initiated it on my behalf, and so I get this thing saying I was no longer bound by any of the, previous
rules and regulations.
Oh,
wow.
God.
And so at this point, you were where? You were already in America? You were already in Sacramento, or?
Well, oh yeah, I've been in Sacramento 10 years as a priest, and then after 5 years, I went off and did 5-year program as a doctorate in canon law. anything rather than making a decision,
Yeah.
5 years out of Sacramento, yes, please, and
good grief. And so by this time, were you married to this young lady that you'd met?
Well, not until after I left.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, during the canon law, the law studies period.
I had known her for some time, and I think that was one of my failings that finally dawned on me, that I was attracted to women, which almost today sounds like a virtue as far as
you said it, we didn't.
but anyway, that happened to be it finally dawned on me, this is what I need to be doing.
Right.
And,
Wow.
yeah.
Very interesting. And so so in the next steps, there you are. You've presumably, when you're a priest, the church provides things like a roof over your head and 3 square meals a day, right?
Right. Yeah. And very little money to go with it.
Yeah.
Right. But the basics are covered, right? You've just got to buy your toothpaste. Right. So how do you mentally, because now you're a psychotherapist dealing with stress and all of that, stress management, how did you mentally prepare yourself for, it's almost like, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but it's almost like when people are released from prison for a long time, they have to get back into society, and they don't know what a pint of milk costs or a loaf of bread. Or how do you prepare for something like that?
You jump in at the deep end, because you have to go. You've never applied for a job. All of your experience doesn't really count for much in almost any other activity. It's sort of like a friend of mine who was a tail gunner in World War II. He said it's kind of a hard experience to put down on your tail gunner. Who needs one?
Right. Well, this is what we've been reading about Prince Harry recently, that he reckons, the best time, even though it was tough and rough and emotionally difficult because of what they had to do in Afghanistan, it was the best time of his life because he had a purpose, a schedule,
Yeah.
a structure.
Companionship.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but because without all those things, I think, we all start to suffer from some kind of stress, which is what the COVID pandemic did in a large part by locking everybody in their house. Boom, all of the rules went out the window, didn't they?
Right. Well, I think COVID actually kind of was the tipping point. I think we were already set up for a stress reaction. We've lost some things and gained some things, and one of the things we have gained is we've got 24-hour news. When you think that stress is my body's response to urgencies. I produce chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, in response to urgencies. Well, when I have 24-hour urgency, diseases you don't even know you have, tune in at 20 after the hour, we'll tell you. So we have this increased sense of urgency and striving and fear of missing out and all of these things, that are so much part of our society. And then the other hand, we have an almost total collapse of any, narrative that helps us modulate that. So our great grandparents had half their children die before they got to adulthood. And somehow they had such an impervious narrative that modulated this terrible reality and allowed them to continue functioning. We've had a collapse of this kind of credible narrative. And I think that those two things together were already ready to strike. And then COVID came and just added that last thing. So
now I think I read where you deal a lot with veterans and
I did in San Francisco
suffering from PTSD.
Yeah, the Vietnam veterans, that was like one of the big, demographics in my practice in San Francisco for 25 years. Yeah.
And so how do you approach that? Because you can't just put all PTSD in one bucket. We have a wonderful friend who's also in the comedy business, and that's his release valve, his pressure cooker valve, if you will. He was shot in the head in Iraq, and then he came home and started something called GIs of Comedy, still serving one joke at a time. And so he deals with his particular PTSD as stress. But, sometimes you see these things on YouTube or, one size fits all, we'll fix your whatever it is. It must be difficult as a psychotherapist. First of all, you have to get to know your patient, and there has to be trust there, I assume.
Yeah, you have to start where they are. You can't come in with some one size fits all thing. And and also working in conjunction with the Veterans Administration, they had groups, so you were kind of working in conjunction with a whole network that helped support them. And you worked through certain individual issues with each of them, but then they also had their own support groups. And group therapy, and so it was part of a whole network of support that we tried to give them. And these men, some of them came back and did very well for a while. I remember this one man, he used to kind of look down his nose on people who were suffering from PTSD, and I get a call from him, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I just got out of the gutter." He said, "I was walking down in the financial district in San Francisco. He's a lawyer. He was out for lunch, and a car backfired, and he's in the gutter shouting incoming, and in a $2,000, $4,000 suit or something." And he said, "I think maybe I do need help."
Yeah. We have another dear friend down in Oceanside. He is a sous chef at a Japanese restaurant. He's not Japanese. He's all American. And he is a war vet. And also he's been a firefighter and an EMT and what have you. And we were all in Houston at a culinary event around the world in 10,000 bites with 45 chefs from 10 countries. And it was just a whale of a time, and it was great.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, we were on the front steps of the Hotel Zaza, and all of a sudden the heavens opened, it started to rain, and there was a crack of thunder right overhead, and he nearly lost his stuff. He said, hug me, hold me, just hold me tight. I need my thunder blanket. And it just hit him the wrong way. I mean, he's this big strapping lad, amazing life, incredible chef. And it took was one crack of thunder, and he just lost his shit.
So actually what Dina and I are doing is producing a series of talks on the subject of stress and how to manage stress and various other topics, but stress and management of stress is so relevant today. So many people are suffering from it, and we don't have very clear values anymore. Like what is worth worrying about, kind of thing.
Yes. Well, again, it brings us back to this false news business. Anybody can post on the internet any garbage they want to. And there are so many vulnerable people out there that's just, especially in the shut-in period of time.
Between politics and their, ebb and flow and their partisanship, and then the media has their partisanship, and then they're all spun up to and paid for by the advertisers, who are the junk food companies and the pharmaceutical over-the-counter drug companies and Budweiser alcohol beer and what. It's just I can see very easily how someone could get into a spin cycle with all of that and think, I'm going crazy, when you're really not. It's just you're being manipulated, correct?
Right. And when you think back that it took 3 weeks for people to know who was the president back 100 years ago. I mean, the news cycle was very slow that they had to deal with. They had to deal with immediate things in their lives. But I think we also have this kind of unrealistic thing of that we shouldn't have problems, and that's the problem. Stress is sometimes only talked about as toxic stress, but we need a certain amount of, benign stress, if you like. It's called challenge, in order to feel productive and to get us off our couch. And
so there is something called good stress, you would say.
There's that which motivates and challenges us, and I think that if we don't have that, we're bored and we're unproductive. We're like little boats tied up at the wharf. We're kind of unstable and neurotic. But once we get underway and we have a challenge and we're working on it, we have a sense of stability and direction and accomplishment and self-esteem. Whereas
I'll say Ruth and I will try to keep that in mind, because we have so many with the business that we run, particularly Ruth.
Businesses,
and almost every day something will happen with either the internet or one of the servers, or
someone says, whoops, I can't pay my bill. Got a bunch of those at the moment.
We're a problem-solving species. That's one of the things that somebody one time told me, that what do we do for recreation? We actually set up problems, whether it's crosswords or chess or golf or
jigsaws.
Actually, welcoming challenges is a kind of what we ought to be doing, rather than fearing reality. But then when it's made toxic by either too long duration or way beyond our capacity to control it.
I mean, I always maintain, and especially since COVID, there are two things in every household, in every home, that are trying to kill you. One is the couch, the other is the fridge. And you have to balance your time with each. You have to manage that, and get out and walk around the block, right?
Right, absolutely. I have the problem with but the funny thing you mentioned, cat. Every living thing is stressed. I mean, you move a plant from one pot to another, it'll have a transplant shock, right?
Yes.
You move your cat from one house to another, move another cat in, it'll be stressed and it'll start acting out. So all living things have this stress reaction. And so we're not exempt, but we sort of live somehow like we're our minds are untethered balloons or something that aren't subject to the laws of nature, but we're connected to the mud, We're
connected to the mud. I like that. Yeah, well, we have been the last 4 weeks in California, have we not?
well,
Holy
yeah.
crap. So, I mean, obviously we've defined here what is good stress, and I think everybody knows what bad stress is. So do you preach that you really need to recognize one from the other and deal with them differently? Or how do you train the mind to say, okay, well, that's bad stress and I'll deal with it later because it has to be dealt with? Like, we've all got tax day coming up. It's not a big deal for most people, but it's a project. It's a pain in the neck.
Yeah. And I think that that's where values come in. Values are the things worth worrying about. We used to have a thing we'd do in group therapy years ago where you had people tear up 20 pieces of paper, and on each one, they wrote one of the things that's important to them in their lives. And then you went around as the therapist with a trash can. You said, you just lost one of them. So they had to put one of them away, and you got down to, I remember, somebody warning me, don't ever go below 5 because then they'll want to kill you, because it would mean you had to throw away your children or your health or something. So, but, to pare it down to what things are worth holding on to.
Right.
And to worth worrying about.
Are you my aunt, my mom's older sister, who passed on a few years ago, but she was well into her 90s. She adopted after her one and only. She met and married her boyfriend out of school, and they were together the whole lives, and he had a heart attack and died. And she took off to Australia to go visit the cousins. She'd always wanted to do it. And we're all like, oh my God, she's in her late 80s and she's going to Australia by herself. So she's like, so if I die on the plane, I was on the way to do something. If I can't change the outcome, I'm not going to worry about it. Just get it off the list.
Yeah, that's it. If you can't do anything about it, except the things you cannot change, I've got the courage to change the things I can, and then the wisdom to know the difference in these two. Epictetus wrote that, 2,000 years ago. It formalized as the Serenity Prayer much later, but Epictetus also said it is not external events that distress us. It is our interpretation of their significance.
Yes. We allow that. We allow it to happen, right?
Yeah.
So are you a proponent of quiet time or meditation or?
Yeah, meditation is great. It allows things to settle down. But I do think you can't then go out and go back to this old thinking habits again. I think we really do have to. I think that's where cognitive therapy comes in, where I learn a different narrative. The narrative is that kind of interface between my inner world and what's happening. And if my narrative is henny penny, the sky is falling, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen next, then what's going to happen? I'm wondering, why am I nervous? It's almost like you drink 20 cups of coffee, you wonder why you're nervous. Well, if I'm listening to all of this stuff that's stimulating all these chemicals, why can't I sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning? I've just been creating the wreckage of my future, in my mind. I've got all the chemicals to fight the saber-toothed tiger, outside the cave, all floating through me.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me, creating the wreckage of my future reminds me of a lovely story. My ex-husband, Paul Antonelli, who's a 7 or 8 time Emmy-winning music supervisor, was working for years and still is on live music as they used to film All My Children, One Life to Live, all of the daytime soaps.
General Hospital, Days of Our Lives.
He would literally get the script on a Monday and they'd start filming it and breaking it down on a Tuesday, and they'd shoot Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they'd shoot like 5 episodes. So he would sit with a keyboard in the studio, having trying to compose for the scene, from scratch, because they didn't have the time to clear the music. And one time he screwed up royally and he played a bum note and whatever. And Georgette, the producer, came into the booth and said to him, "Paul Francis Antonelli, you're unraveling the tapestry that is my life, thread by effing thread." So he had it put on a T-shirt and sent to him.
I know, catastrophizer.
Oh my Lord! But yeah, it's just very
Now
funny.
tell me you've written some books, haven't you?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I've written a couple of books. One is Bitter Oranges, which is the story. It's a fictionalized story. It's fiction of a young priest, not very holy, who comes from Ireland to California in the '60s, and yeah, exactly, Ruth. And he kind of falls into the trap of self-indulgence of the '60s in California, and enjoys it. And but meanwhile, he's constantly promoted within the church. And, so anyways, Bitter Oranges. And the title, as I was telling Ruth, is like, you're probably familiar with Shirley Valentine, that great movie.
Oh, yes.
And she wanted, you understand that, growing up where I grew up, the idea of having oranges growing alongside the road. Oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would be like. And so he always wanted this to be somewhere you could pick oranges alongside the road. And so the title is Bitter Oranges.
I see. When you got there, life wasn't quite so sweet.
Yeah. No. And the other one is The Woods, which is sort of a fictionalized version. My mother came from a family of girls, and their father was the local magistrate, and their mother was from the parish is called after her people. So, and she's a rebel, a total Irish rebel, and he's an appointee of King George as the magistrate. And so their daughters, they sent them all to convent boarding schools and all of that kind of stuff. But they chose very interesting and kind of rebellious lives.
Right.
And so anyway, that's The Woods, because that's the name of that was his estate.
I was saying when we were chatting, doing our technical test last week, it sounds a little bit like the Mitford sisters we were talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. In fact, I looked them up after we had talked, because I had remembered that the English Nazi party.
That's right.
Yes.
Married him, and well, it's a bit like that. One of them, in the story anyway, became a communist. One of them became an Irish, a fighter in the Cumann na mBan, which is the Irish Women's IRA, and so kind of rather diverse, not exactly convent girls.
Based on reality.
We could call them the not so Fab Four, right?
Yeah. Well, I used to talk to this Lutheran in Sacramento, and he would talk about how their people were falling off in church. And I said, you know how you raise Protestants? You send them all to Catholic school.
That's so
they know what they're protesting,
That's
so
right.
Being born a protester is kind of hard, but if you know it. I was totally kidding. All you good Catholics, I don't mean
funny.
Yeah, I think our friend Dervla McNulty from the Emerald Isle is on. I saw her.
Yeah, I wrote to her last night and said, do be sure to tune in tomorrow, Derv.
No, we've got people on from all over UK. Efrat's on from Israel.
Yeah.
Ireland,
Australia.
England, Australia.
Yeah.
I see somebody's up early. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously we'll post
mail now as the result of but
that's so funny. So tell me about these stories and this documentary, if you can. What can you tell us about your next project?
Well, Dina and I and Jeff, her partner, are producing a series of about 20-minute talks on topics such as stress, but also things like values and fear, the various effects of fear, anxiety, worry, and all of these kind of things, and just topical things like dealing with reality. And while you were talking about some of the things, this great old lady in San Francisco, Florette Pomeroy, one of her great things she told me early on, she said, "Seamus, something I found extremely valuable, at any given moment, do only what you're doing at that moment." And talk about a stress reliever.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what am I doing this moment? And then only do that.
Concentrate,
Focus. Yeah, I think that we've been desensitized with, multitasking is good, and you're supposed to be able to listen to a podcast while you're tweeting and, waiting for an Uber to go somewhere to meet somebody, or it's just all too much. It really is.
I tried it one time. I was driving down from Sacramento down to San Luis Obispo to give a talk at Cal Poly, and I'm driving down in the middle of summer through that hot 101, and I was so tense, and I thought of Florette, and I thought, what am I doing?
Right.
I'm just sitting on a car seat aiming south.
Right.
A moment before that, I was driving south, I was driving north, I was giving the talk, it wasn't going well, I was oversleep, and once I got into what am I doing this instant?
I think if you can train your mind, I have difficulty because I don't know if I'm ADD, ADHD, OCD. I don't even know what any of that crap means. But I know that I can't sit at my computer and do one thing for more than about 4 hours. I have to get up and go do something else, like make a sandwich or walk around the house, or I just have to change my view. My attention span is getting longer, but how people sit at a desk for 8 hours, 5 days a week doing the same old job I have the greatest admiration for their concentration, because it would drive me insane.
Ruth, if you can sit for 4 hours concentrating, you don't have ADHD.
Okay.
Oh,
okay. Well, good. Yeah. And I get a free diagnosis, and you get a car, and you get a car.
You're a miracle of concentration in today's world. You can't get English major students to read novels anymore.
Oh, I know.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sound bites, so.
That's
yes.
funny.
Yeah.
Well,
Which is sad.
so the folks can find you on both SeamusO'Connor.org and
Right.
SeamusO'Connor.com.
Well, that's my novels. SeamusO'Connor.org is where we're going to be dropping these talks.
Is it fair to say they're like TED Talks? They're 15, 20 minutes and they're on a subject?
About like that. Yeah. And
Great.
Good.
and that'll be they'll be dropping by the middle of February,
Okay.
the first 2 or 3, and then subsequent weeks. So
Okay.
Great.
Fantastic. Excellent. And then you also have another, you assist people in their 12-step recovery, don't you? Which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, right. And that's just so satisfying. I work with them in Marin. There's a treatment center called Serenity Knolls, a great treatment center out in West Marin, beautiful area. And I've been working there as a psychotherapist, even by Zoom, for about 20 years now.
Oh.
So I do it every month. I do a week up there. And
Great.
so
That's wonderful. No, I think, and like I said before, in your honor, I'm drinking a non-alcoholic sangria today. I wish there were more of those kind of things available, but I think it's coming to the fore. But no,
Yeah.
it's not just about alcohol. Obviously, it's drugs and it's mental problems, and it's addiction of any kind is bad, right? It could be chocolate.
Treating problems they bring to they treat it with alcohol or drugs, I think, is their attempt to treat their condition.
Self-medication. Yeah. No, well, that's no good. So kids, thank you for joining us today from all over the world. We will be posting this to our brand new YouTube playlist for non-Facebookers shortly. And that is bit.ly. You can see it at the bottom, bit.ly/TeaFlix YouTube. And you will be able to see the wonderful Seamus O'Connor back up on the YouTube channel and share it with all of your friends. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. I know how busy you are. And it's just been a really heartwarming and fascinating, insightful conversation.
And you haven't heard the last of us, Seamus.
No, no.
It's
Oh, no.
absolute pleasure to meet both of you. It's just
Yeah,
been
you
much-
too.
Thank
It's been
you.
absolutely
Okay.
lovely.
God bless.
Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.